not everybody can afford a car, not everybody can afford insurance.
This week in Pennsylvania, a push for hundreds of millions of more dollars for mass transit, most of it headed to Philadelphia, which does not sit well with non-city lawmakers. Speaking of Philly, a top aide to the mayor and her husband were handcuffed by state police after a routine traffic stop last weekend. There was fallout this week. And should solitary confinement be banned in PA prisons? A newly introduced bill says yes. Hello and welcome to This Week in Pennsylvania. I'm Dennis Owens. As always, we're covering hot topics in PA policy and politics, as well as the issues that are important to you and your family. Troubling video after an aide to Philadelphia Mayor Sherelle Parker and her husband were arrested and handcuffed following a routine traffic stop that became anything but routine. State police pulled over Selena Morrison, who heads the city's LGBTQ office, for tailgating and failure to have her lights on during rainy conditions. Morrison's husband pulled up behind the pullover and got out of his car. An altercation with the trooper ensued. Both were handcuffed. They say they were targeted because they're black. An internal affairs investigation is underway. The trooper's on administrative duty. A day after the incident, state police had their appropriations hearing in Harrisburg. Lawmakers asked if state police are being properly trained.
We inculcate cadets to be as professional as they can be with regard and without regard to class, color, creed, or condition. It is our goal that in every police-citizen encounter that we strive to provide that professional police service.
Now, body cameras may have helped shed light on the incident. All troopers will eventually have them. Philadelphia's have not yet gotten their cameras, but the commissioner says they will in the next 2 months, and that's a priority. Activists outside that PSP budget hearing focused on a different issue. They want to decriminalize small quantities of adult-use cannabis and are asking PSP to stop arresting people for possessing marijuana. The group is called NORML, National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws. They note many of our neighbors are already doing it.
All of those states, New Jersey, Delaware, Ohio, they've all stopped marijuana arrests. But here in Pennsylvania, we're still arresting 35 people every single day just for marijuana possession. We would like to see that stop.
Governor Shapiro would like to see the legalization of recreational marijuana, which NORML also supports. Speaking of the governor, he's calling for a huge increase in transportation funding, much of it for mass transit, much of that for Philadelphia and SEPTA. During its budget hearing this week, PennDOT Secretary Mike Carroll said, quote, "I'm not going to sit here and tell you PennDOT delivers perfection. We strive for perfection." Governor Shapiro wants $300 million more to go to mass transit, pushing the overall spending to $1 billion. Skeptical Republicans point to decreasing ridership and increasing debt at SEPTA and fear it's throwing good money after bad.
It's not good money after bad. It's an investment in our Commonwealth. The economy of Pennsylvania is driven in a large way by the economic activity in southeastern Pennsylvania.
Mass transit, one of the hot spots in what's expected to be a contentious budget season. Republicans insisting Shapiro's spending requests are just unsustainable. Pennsylvania Turnpike and PennDOT announced the start of the Work Zone speed safety camera program. It's actually been around as a pilot program the past 5 years, but it's now embedded in Pennsylvania law. Speeding drivers will get tickets in the mail, but the goal is to make sure workers get home in one piece.
The vision's protection. We're looking to try to improve the safety for motorists and for employees and contractors who are working in our work zones. The big number is the 50% reduction in crashes in work zones where these cameras are present.
Pennsylvania joins Maryland and Illinois as the third state with such work zone speed enforcement. Republican State Senator and former gubernatorial candidate Doug Mastriano is free and clear from an ethics investigation. Back in January, you may remember, Democratic State Senator Art Haywood asked the Senate Ethics Committee to investigate Mastriano's actions leading up to and including January 6th. This week, it declined to do so. Mastriano was in D.C. that day, but denies any involvement in violence and called Haywood's request, quote, a stunt. Haywood says he is disappointed at the committee's decision not to move forward. Should solitary confinement be abolished from Pennsylvania prisons? Yes, say 6 former inmates who filed a federal class action lawsuit this week to end the practice. The lawsuit alleges that individuals serving their sentences alone are often there too long, even indefinitely, and also alleges half of those inmates are mentally ill. Also this week, the House Judiciary Committee held an informational hearing on solitary confinement with testimony from those who experienced it and are now fighting to end it. But others say, not so fast.
To this day, I cannot believe, and if I didn't experience it firsthand, I don't know if I would believe that this is how we treat individuals in our incarceration system.
We believe the system should remain as is. If it's limited in any way, Pennsylvania will be sending a clear signal to inmates that it's open season on our officers, prison employees, and also other inmates.
The Department of Corrections will not comment on active litigation, and it did not attend Tuesday's hearing, but did submit written testimony. Well, lots of high school students aren't quite sure where they want to go to college or even how to compare different schools. There's now a bipartisan push to help with that big financial decision. Republican State Representative Thomas Kutz and Democrat Justin Fleming are teaming up on a bill to require the State Department of Education to create a comparison tool on its website. Kutz says the Department of Education is already required to collect the data the comparison tool would feature, but it needs to make the information more accessible.
That will allow any student to be able to compare one institution to the next, see what the real cost of attending is, what the average cost per student is, room and board, scholarships that may be available, so that they have side-by-side comparison.
Kutz and Fleming will introduce it in coming weeks. The House returns to session on March 18th. Well, March is Colorectal Cancer Awareness Month, and lawmakers want more people to be aware sooner. They're pushing a bill that would lower the age for insurance to cover screenings from 50 to 45. The bill's supporters include State Rep Pat Gallagher, who was diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer at age 45, and State Rep Tara Khan, family nurse practitioner who refers patients each week for screenings, including colonoscopies.
When you get an x-ray, if they find a mass on your lung, they can't do anything with that x-ray. But if they're doing a colonoscopy and they find a polyp, they can take out the polyp. They can do a biopsy. It's really a critical test.
At 45, I was 5 years before I was even supposed to even get checked. And that is alarming, and especially how far along I became. It is important that we move these ages down without barriers.
Stage 1 colorectal cancer has no symptoms but is highly treatable when it is detected early. Well, guns are prohibited at the polls in places like Texas and Florida, but not in Pennsylvania, at least for the moment. A bill introduced Tuesday would ban firearms from polling stations across the Commonwealth. Supporters worry about increasing incidents of voters and election workers being threatened or harassed. 11 other states have similar bans. Right now in Pennsylvania, you are allowed to carry at the polls unless the specific location already bans them, like courthouses and schools. The ban would not apply to police or military members who are on duty at polling locations. Well, it is a big week on this station. We have 2 live debates for you, and we're very excited about it. In the race for Attorney General, the state's top prosecutor. On Tuesday night, the 5 Democratic candidates will square off in a showdown televised statewide. That's from 7 to 8 p.m. And then on Thursday night, the 2 Republicans hoping to win the open seat will be live in our studio. It is a live event. You can see it Thursday night at 7 right here on your local election headquarters. But as we head to break, we want to remember Pennsylvania State Police Commissioner, former Tyree Blocker, who recently passed away. The Chester County native enlisted in the state police in 1975, retired in 2005, but then 10 years later rejoined the state police to become commissioner in 2015 at the request of then Governor Tom Wolf. Blocker retired again in 2018. Tyree Blocker was 71. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
What's going to be challenging to us as we move forward.
PA Chamber Minute is paid for by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry.
Welcome to the PA Chamber Minute. As the state's largest broad-based business advocacy organization, the PA Chamber is constantly working to make it easier to do business in PA. We recently surveyed businesses across Pennsylvania and found that the single most important issue impacting companies today is the workforce. Simply put, too many businesses cannot find qualified workers, and the PA Chamber is working to change that. From advocating for policies that will allow businesses to create good-paying jobs to supporting investments in career and technical education, and also bringing together higher ed institutions with business leaders to align curriculum with industry needs. The PA Chamber is leading the way to strengthen Pennsylvania's workforce. If you're an employer struggling with workforce challenges or you want to get involved in our movement, visit pachamber.org.
I am greatly troubled by the spending levels contained in this proposal. Specifically, the proposal to spend $3.5 billion more than we take in 2024, 2025.
Well, welcome back to This Week in Pennsylvania. That was Republican Senator Ryan Aument saying what Republicans have been saying since Governor Shapiro rolled out his budget address, that he wants to spend too much and it's unsustainable. This is the director of the Independent Fiscal Office, Matt Knittel, just like the name sounds. Independent, nonpartisan numbers crunchers. We have a $14 billion both rainy day fund and surplus. How'd we get that?
Sure. Two ways, really. There was direct monies that came from the federal government due to COVID, and we used those to bolster our rainy day fund. But there were also indirect monies, so stimulus payments, PPP, the EIP payments that came in and then raised our sales taxes.
And the money that's in the rainy day fund, actually, we get interest off that. That generates income too, right?
Yes. Combined, that $14 billion surplus right now is generating about $800 million. It's earning about 5.25. So it is a large income generator currently.
But that $14 billion is in the crosshairs and targeted for a lot of things. And Governor Shapiro wants to, I believe, increase spending about 7%, about $3 billion more this year. What are the problems with that, or potential concerns?
So the concerns that have been raised right now, as you noted, there's $14 billion, but what does that look like going forward? Are those monies carried forward into the future? Are they growing? And how is that surplus, that $14 billion used?
But Republicans have been saying there's red flags. Governor Shapiro is saying we've got a lot of needs. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to address those needs. Big pot of money. But there's also a structural deficit right now, meaning we are spending more than we're bringing in, right? So that's fine. If you have money in the bank, you can spend more, but you use the money from the bank. But how long before that money in the bank is gone?
Sure, that's the big debate that's going on right now. As noted by the senator, there's about a $3 billion shortfall next year under the governor's proposal. And under the governor's projections, by the end of the 5-year window in 27-28, the rainy day fund, the general fund surplus at $14 billion is no longer there. It's depleted.
Another big important part of the budget is you project out what you think the revenues are going to be in out years after this year. And based on the hearings I've seen, the governor's projections are higher than your projections, and that's important because if he projects they're going to get more money, that means there's more things he can spend it on, and if you got less money, there's less things you can spend it on. What's the discrepancy there?
Sure. So both the governor and my office are making 5-year projections in general fund revenues. They're generally assuming that things are a little stronger. The one item that we've identified is corporations, the profits that they pay. And that's very important in Pennsylvania because the tax rate on corporate profits is 8.5% versus personal income, which is only 3%.
What are we seeing with revenues coming in now? Have they? I know for several months everything was ahead of projections. That seems to have slowed and gone the other direction.
I think that's accurate. Things are definitely slowed down. In fact, we're seeing in the labor market right now our withholding tax revenues. They're slowing. Just yesterday, today, in fact, the Department of Labor and Industry revised down the Pennsylvania job gains from 100,000 down to 40,000. So the labor market is definitely slowing.
That's a big down revision.
It was large.
What are the concerns? Just talk to me about the concerns and talk to the average viewer about, okay, the governor wants to spend all this, like Republicans have been saying, spend it on one-time things if that's what you're going to do, but don't put it in programs that require recurring, because then in 3, 4, 5 years, taxes will have to be increased, or we're going to have to find money somewhere. Is that accurate?
It is accurate that the monies that we got over the last 2 or 3 years, that $14 billion, is largely due to, I would say, non-recurring sources, generally COVID, stimulus, and indirect monies. So it is the case that we do think there's a structural deficit. That is, there is a shortfall under normal operating conditions.
So do you give, I know you're nonpartisan, but what's your advice to people? If we're just asking, Matt, what is your advice on what we should do?
So my office doesn't give advice. However, coming up I can say in the hearings, one of the main points that was debated is how much money should be in that rainy day fund, what's prudent, and what do the rating agencies look at. And our research suggests that the rating agencies think about 12% to 15% of the spending should be set aside, and right now we have about 30%.
The governor wants to legalize adult use cannabis and projects for this budget $166 million. Is that a little rosy considering it's not even legal?
It depends. So it's not legal yet, but if we look at the other states around us who now have legalized marijuana, it could be more than that. We think upwards of 250 to 300.
Okay. Now, everybody out there, everybody thinks we pay too much taxes. You recently did a study. Where does Pennsylvania rank in state and local taxes paid?
So our findings, and this is published on our website, we're about 19th across the 50 states. Some things we're higher in, such as corporate net income and property taxes, we're about middle of the road, and some things were lower, like sales and use taxes.
Okay. And so just tell me, as you know the budget and you know what's going on, what is your biggest concern just in a snapshot?
Yeah, going forward, I always fall back, the last few years at least, is demographics and how we're aging and will we have enough workers to fulfill these needs, especially at things such as nursing home facilities or home health care workers.
We're aging, really? Said the old guy. Thank you very much, Matt. I appreciate it. Stay with us. Our analyst coming up next on This Week in Pennsylvania. Raise your hand if you support a woman's right to choose with no exceptions. Woman's right to choose with no exceptions. Every one of you support that. Okay, let's turn to another topic. And that was a debate we did this week with 6 Democratic candidates for the 10th Congressional District that's currently held by Scott Perry, Republican. By the way, Christopher Nicholas, the Eagle Consulting Group, and Danielle Gross with Clearpoint Communications.
You got it right again.
Maybe when you've been here 17 years, I will get it easily. But let's talk about that moment, because the 6 Democrats all said they support a woman's right to choose with no exceptions. Have we crossed a bridge here where that was considered a bit taboo, but now, after success, you tell me, after success at the ballot box,
I mean, what we're seeing post the Dobbs decision is we're seeing what the effect that abortion restrictions have on women's lives and on women's reproductive health. We are seeing women have their reproductive organs removed, who are having to go across the country to get care that they could have previously gotten in their home state before.
Not the issue in Pennsylvania, of course.
No, and studies indicate that 65,000 women have been forced to carry their rapist baby since they live in states that have since outlawed abortion.
65,000 in the last 2 years?
No, yes.
That seems pretty high.
It's a pretty reputable think tank that thought of that. So any restriction is directly impacting women across the country.
So I think we should get used to that clip, Dennis, because we're going to see that in a lot of TV ads in the fall here in central Pennsylvania. Those folks are way off the reservation when it comes to the mainstream position on abortion. They are now all to the left of Governor Shapiro, who supports the current law, which is 23 or 24 weeks. So those folks have said a woman can have an abortion for any reason at any time. That, to me, is as extreme as someone saying a woman can never have one.
Anyone having an abortion after 23 weeks is having it because of a severe fetal anomaly or a severe life-threatening issue.
And I think we're going to see that play out large in this race. To me, that was a big gift by those Democrats to the incumbent Republican Scott Perry.
But in the last couple of elections, that's the right side of the ballot box, it seems, at least the Democratic view on abortion.
In the 10th Congressional District, that's Republican majority and has elected and re-elected Scott Perry. I don't think that's the road to a Democrat getting 50% plus one. I was also shocked in that debate. They very rarely mentioned Perry's name, let alone went after him. So
well, because I thought it was refreshing as a Democrat, because for years we've seen people namely start by only attacking Scott Perry. So I thought it was nice to see the candidates not just run saying, I'm not Scott Perry, but this is what I believe. And as a member, well, mostly as a resident of the 10th District.
Well, you're going to vote in that primary. I'm not. So right. we might have different characteristics.
Very good. We got to take a quick time out. Going to come right back. More This Week in Pennsylvania after the break. Welcome back to This Week in Pennsylvania. The big event this week, the State of the Union address. Democrats were a little nervous. I think Joe Biden certainly showed energy and stamina and was forceful. And I think that if there were Democrats that were nervous, they're a little less nervous today.
I think he obviously took his caffeine shot, that 4-hour energy, whatever it's called, before he went on. To me, it was an overtly political speech, which is fine. It's his speech to make. To me, it was also kind of the opening bell in the general election, now that it's clear that Trump will be the nominee of the Republicans and Biden already is the nominee for the Democrats. So this was the first of many rounds in that.
Other than championing Bob Casey's shrinkflation
Bobby
argument
Casey.
and less,
Bobby Casey.
less Snickers and less potato chips, which might not be a bad thing overall for Americans' health. But what was your takeaway?
Yeah, I thought Biden was full of energy. He showed that he is up for the job again. And I think he did a great job of highlighting his accomplishments. He talked about reducing prescription drug costs. He talked about standing up for regular Americans against corporations who have recorded record profits at a time when, and blaming inflation. And talking about protecting our freedoms, talking about the women's right to an abortion, talking about protecting IVF, which is under threat throughout much of the country due to the Dobbs
It's not
decision.
under threat anywhere. Alabama just reversed this decision in 2 weeks.
Talk to any actual assisted reproductive technology doctor, and they will tell you that.
On
that
that
is
topic,
under
what
threat.
struck me was when he looked at those Supreme Court justices and then also rallied around the abortion. Do you
When he
think
tried to
Democrats are a little
intimidate-
concerned about immigration and the economy maybe taking over the narrative and want to keep abortion forefront?
Absolutely. Any campaign is about what you talk about as much as the candidates. So obviously they know they have a problem with immigration and inflation, which is why they want to talk about abortion and greedflation. And Republicans, the opposite. That's basic.
Well, if Republicans really wanted to do something about immigration, they would have gone along with the immigration deal that they tanked. And then, said, oh, we have a problem, but they chose not to do anything about it.
I want to tell you about it. Tuesday night, we've got the 5 Democrats running for Attorney General. They're going to debate right here at 7 o'clock. You can see it on this channel. What are you guys looking for in that?
Somebody to break out of the pack. I'm
Obviously,
sorry.
Yes, no, I agree. I agree.
And Eugene DePasquale is the former Auditor General. He's from kind of the West. Everybody else is from the East. Is that an advantage?
Yes, it was not an advantage in a previous Attorney General primary on your side, but it could be an advantage this time.
Quickly, Thursday night, we got the 2 Republicans, and there could be some elbows thrown because there's been some pretty testy sound bites between these two, the Republican. Craig Williams, Dave Sunday is the endorsed. He's the York County DA and the endorsed candidate. Quickly, what do we think?
That's going to be spicy.
Well, I think Craig Williams has some different experience in the military. Dave Sunday has the more traditional experience for our side being a DA.
All right, thank you so much. Thanks for joining us. See you next week on This Week.